Cross. Now, from the country's leading humanitarian body, the Uganda Red Cross being one of the front runners and fighters of the Ebola virus on ground, I am delighted to be in the company of the Director Communications, Strategic Partnerships, as well as Resource Mobilization, Irene Nakasita, to give us a glimpse of their auxiliary role in the fight against the Ebola virus disease. Good morning to you, Irene.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Yeah.
Well, it's a tough time that you and I get to meet again and have a conversation. I know that the Uganda Red Cross is always at the forefront. We saw you playing a good role, COVID-19. We have seen you being always, first respondents to so many cases of accident scenarios here and there, to just put things into order, firsthand, and we commend you for that. So, as someone who has been at the forefront, especially of this Ebola outbreak in the 2 districts, could you highlight for us the current situation, since the lockdown? What does it look like now? Has the lockdown done more good than harm, or more harm than good?
Well, thank you so much for having me, and good morning to the viewers. I must say it's really been a tough job. It's not business as usual, and since the onset of this outbreak, of course our teams have really been on ground. For starters, it was with no single coin, but we have one of our principles of voluntary service, and so the Red Cross being a humanitarian agency that has membership and a large volunteer base, we promote the spirit of voluntarism in our people. And so whenever an emergency occurs, whenever a disaster occurs, we don't struggle to get people who volunteer or who come out voluntarily to join hands with us and do our usual business of saving lives. And so even when this outbreak occurred, the community-based volunteers were ready to volunteer even before we had money to respond. So now the numbers, we first had about 450 volunteers coming up to volunteer, but now we were talking of thousands of them. And these are spread now across the 7 districts that have been mapped by the government as being high risk. But most importantly, Mubende and Kasanda, we have more teams there. So the situation, I must say, since the declaration of the lockdown by the president, people are now doing more intensified community engagement, because then we know that people are home, they're easier to get, access, interact with, and speak to them. I want to point out a very, very big thing that we may not have known about, or what we call rumors. Initially, people were saying Ebola is witchcraft. Did you know that? We were hearing rumors. So many times whenever we have such disease outbreaks, there are so many rumors, but demystifying them requires a face-to-face interview. I know we might feature on radio stations or TVs to speak about these things, but sometimes some people don't have access to any of those.
That's why I wanted to actually go, because I know that sensitization has played a big role in the fight against Ebola. But there's what you would call the on-air sensitization versus the community direct sensitization. Tell us about the impact in regards to actually arresting the situation sooner than later.
We're actually feeling a very, very positive impact at the moment, because like I was talking about the community engagement, the volunteers go door to door. It makes it a little easier. And then even those with questions can ask, and you reply or you answer them instantly. So somebody doesn't have to say, okay, I will wait for a radio talk show and then I call in. So what if they don't have airtime? So here they are able to ask questions, and then the volunteers respond to them. We even have caseworkers, the VHTs as well. So it's more easier now when people are home, so they listen, and I must say that the response is really good, because now the intensified community engagement and the sensitizations are starting to yield more fruit than before. So probably that even accounts to the reduction of a few cases, and like initially the numbers were just going high. So if you start seeing a slow increment in terms of the numbers, then that shows or points to a yielding of a fruit out of the community engagement exercise. And this has to continue until probably Uganda is declared Ebola free. And like I said, volunteers being community-based makes it even easier, because then they are speaking to people who know them. Yeah, they call you Musao. So when they have an issue, they come to you, Musao.
So it's not the case that you're going to get a Priscilla from Kampala and deploy her in Mubende. The volunteers are within the community directly. So
we empower
they know
them.
the society and how they interact and interface with such issues of
it's only the big complicated cases where we bring in now the experts.
Okay.
But the day-to-day sensitization is done by themselves, the volunteers who are community-based. So even when I give you the Ebola banner with the language that probably it's in English, and these are your people, they translate and use the language that their people do understand. But also we believe that people listen to opinion leaders, people they know. So if, for example, you say chairman is the one who has said this, they will all follow. Than bringing a Priscilla from Kampala to come and speak to us in Mubende. We don't know her. When she speaks, we might take time to really understand that she's actually telling us the truth.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So today marks about 50 days since the Ebola outbreak, and from your analysis of the situation and the contribution of the voluntary work that Uganda Red Cross is doing, what are some of those things that you would register as successes so far? Okay.
First, I'll start with this very unique job that our teams do that nobody else does. That is the safe and dignified burials. When somebody dies, our teams go and bury. Priscilla, this can even bring a tear in my eyes, because that is not a simple job that you and I can do.
Can you give us the details of how that actually gets to happen? What entails that job?
So when of course it goes, people go through intensified training. After training, then they learn the do's and don'ts. But you're dealing with a very deadly virus, and you cannot be sure at what point you can make a mistake. So they have to be extremely, extremely cautious. So of course we give the PPE, the personal protective equipment, which they don. And of course the doffing also has to happen. So like I said, I may not explicitly take you through the process, but just so you know, putting it on is easy, but putting it off is an opportunity that can be a very, very, turn out to be the worst moment of your life, because you can get in contact with the virus. So now these guys who bury, for me, I register that as a success on our end, but I also feel the pain that they go through. So sometimes people bury, but you have to take somebody from Mubende, where they have died from, to a very distant area. Now those guys have to brave that. Now dealing with dead bodies on a daily basis is not a simple job. Probably in 2-3 days they can bury like 4 people. Even in a day they can bury like 2 or 3. So depending on the calls that come through to support that. But I must say we've registered success, because they are conducting the burials very well, and we've not had any challenges. We also have ambulance teams that go to the community to pick the suspected cases and refer them to the Ebola treatment unit. We've also registered successes, because at least our teams are able to do that. But there are also other ambulance teams from the Ministry of Health that are now working as a team. The coordination center is at our branch office in Mubende, so the entire ambulance crew sit there. And in a special way, I want to take a moment of silence and remember Alex, whom we just lost about 2 days ago, and he was an ambulance EMT who lost his life because of Ebola. May his soul rest in peace. Alex was a staff from the MOH, but he was part of us, and he was really part of the ambulance crew that goes to the community to pick people who are sick, bring them to hospital. Yeah, sometimes you can actually, they can say, okay, refer the person to Entebbe, and you have to drive all the way, from Mubende to Entebbe. So these teams are really doing a great job, and we register that as success as well, because they are able to pick the community cases and refer them. Then there is contact tracing, which is also not easy, because some people hide the details. Priscilla, you've been in contact with me, and then they identify you as somebody who has to be isolated, and you don't feel comfortable. people being isolated. Some people hide the identities, but it's not easy to do the contact tracing. But we are also doing it, and we've registered successes as well in that area. Then we have infection prevention and control. We know that this virus can also be killed by washing hands with soap and clean water. So we are availing hand washing facilities at communal places or public places where people can go wash their hands and access the public places. Like if you're going to the market, at least we make sure you wash before you go in there. Then also the community engagement and the risk communication, because then there's this saying in the Red Cross that diseases begin and end in communities. That is why we are strong on community engagement and risk communication, because then we empower the communities with the knowledge that they require to know, then they're able to deal with the disease themselves. Because if I tell you don't touch Priscilla, you won't touch her, and then that means the spread will be limited. So in a way, we've registered a number of progresses and successes, and also the good job that the volunteers are doing. I want to commend it, because on a daily basis somebody wakes up to traverse the entire village. So while I wake up,
in a lot of ways.
True. While I wake up to go to work in Kampala, somebody is under lockdown, but for them their role is to wake up, go move door to door, to preach the gospel of Ebola to another person, so that we reduce the community infections.
Okay. Amidst these successes, what are the challenges that are underlying, that are challenging your work that you're doing on ground?
Yeah, the risk itself is so high, because, I mean, all the teams that are in Mubende are in the harm's way, I must say, because then you do not know at what point somebody will get in contact with the virus. And then we know that, of course, medics have told us it takes about 21 days to manifest. So if I live with it in 21 days, it's easy for me to spread it. Yeah. Whereas we have teams that are staying together, we always have that fear at the back of our minds. And then the teams that are doing the toughest job are the STV teams and the ambulance people. The ambulance people, because they pick the cases, so they are more at risk. But also these guys who bury have a tough job. Priscilla, I don't know if recently you watched the news where they said Red Cross volunteers have been arrested. Now, that is a team that does safe and dignified burials. Now, dealing with dead bodies on a daily basis, such a guy cannot be in the same state of mind like you and I. So they were found playing some music. They have a speaker. And of course, because of the lockdown, bars are not allowed to operate, so probably even music. I don't know if music can't be played from my premise, but they were at their residence and they were arrested. Now, such challenges also come along, because then you do not know at what point you need to relax your mind, regardless of the kind of work you do. But then there's that psychosocial component, which we want to ensure that everybody gets access to. Your state of mind can't remain normal, because you're dealing with an abnormal situation, and so you need a lot of counseling, you need a lot of such kind of support amidst the many community demands. Because if during the day you're burying, when you come back at night, it's not possible that you'll just go straight to your bed. So probably you're going to get illusions, nightmares, because what comes to your mind,
the stigma to self.
Exactly, that stigma. So then now, that on top of the trauma and the stigma that you're going through, then you get arrested. It even beats your heart the more. But amidst all that, like I mentioned on the PSS component, we just have to make sure the PSS is strong, so that these people do not get a mental breakdown themselves. But also the resources. This thing is expensive. It comes with a lot of expenses. Like I was telling you about the safe and dignified burials. If I'm not burying in Mubende and we have to take the body as far as Kisoro, that is fuel. So the PPE, the fuel, it's quite expensive to operate and manage this entire response. But anyway, we continuously fundraise so that we keep this in motion until Uganda is declared Ebola free.
What lessons can we draw from this this fight against Ebola right now, on behalf of government, but also down to the communities?
I must say not even just Ebola, because now we are dealing with episodes of diseases. We had Marburg in 2017 in Queen. Then we got Ebola in 2018. Then now we had COVID 2019, 2020. 2021, then 2022 we are dealing with Ebola again. Communities need to be on high alert, I must mention, and as Ugandans we need to embrace some of these good practices that we've picked, that we've learned, of ensuring that we promote good hygiene and sanitation both at individual and community level, so that we deal with disease outbreaks. But also when the government and ministry and other partners come up to give us precautions and guidelines, let's adhere to them, because most of these diseases, like I said, begin and end in communities, meaning they are preventable if we do the right things.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Your final words, Irene.
I want to thank all the partners and the government that are supporting the Ebola response, and I want to pray that we will continue with the resource mobilization and contributions, so that we are able to deliver on this very good cause of saving lives in communities and ensuring that we adhere to what the ministry is telling us, the guidelines that we have on Ebola prevention, so that we can fight the disease quickly, and then Uganda can be declared Ebola free, and our colleagues who are under the lockdown can live their lives afresh, like how life used to be before. So this is doable. Diseases are preventable. Ebola is easy to fight if we comply with the guidelines that have been given to us.
All right. Thank you so much, Irene, and thank you so much to Uganda.